Good evening, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on when you're watching this, and welcome once again to Math and You. Tonight's episode is on Common Core, that subject that seems to be a shitstorm of controversy, for lack of a better polite way to put it. Joining me tonight, starting off, is Tristan Harris, a teacher, and we're going to be discussing Common Core, whether its problems, if there are any, some of the issues surrounding it, how to improve it, and we'll just introduce people as they happen to join in. There may be the odd comments from people surrounding and what have you. So starting off, Tristan, what is your current background in teaching, and what is your opinion of Common Core as it currently stands?
All right, so I am a teacher in British Columbia public and independent schools. I primarily work as a French teacher. I've taught French immersion grades 1 to 5. I have taught FSL core French from grades 6, 7, 8, and now I'm also teaching 9, 10, and 12. So basically I'm teaching everything except kindergarten and grade 11 for French. I've taught a little bit of math when I was teaching French immersion. So honestly, my experience isn't that vast, and I've come here mostly to learn and hear about other people's opinions. I've been exposed to a bunch of different ideas about how math is supposed to be taught. And you know what? I still kind of informing my opinions about it, but I think a little mix of both is good. I believe in, rote memorization as a vital tool for being able to do a skill for many, many years. But I also believe there's a path of inquiry and a path of understanding that we have to get to before we get to rote memorization, because it's impossible, I think, to really understand the worth of a skill until you actually understand why you need to learn it.
And this ties into the whole practicality aspect of what this show's about. But given you said you've taught a few different styles of math, which one do you find was the most effective for being able to grip students into math and make sure that they actually understood how the processes worked?
My approach when I started with math instruction was very based in the rote memorization. At that point, I was teaching kindergarten French math, so already they're learning what shapes and what numbers are like, and they're also learning it in a new language. So when you're taking that approach, it does have to be very, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then adding in on top, this is what 1 looks like, this is what 2 looks like. And it's a very inquiry-based approach, because you're showing them, what does 1 mean, what does 5 mean, what happens when you're splitting them in half. And for that, it was very effective with my kindergarten students, because that's how they learn naturally, I find. My experience in the older grades is a little bit different, because you are starting to get more into, okay, now you have to memorize your times tables, and I don't really like that approach, but I find it's effective for when they get into grade 6 and I'm trying to explain a concept in French and they don't get it because their foundation in the math skill is so low.
Well, this is one of the things that I wanted to ask about, because I did hear from one person who was talking before this about the issue about the idea that there's this problem with rote memorization, that it's more like teaching about authority, or the teacher is the authority figure and memorize this, and less about understanding the math at a later point. I'm curious, from your perspective, have you found that any of the students were having difficulty with math at later stages because of rote memorization, or your thoughts on that, please?
I think it's more they don't understand the basics of it. So when we get into I'm trying to think of a really good example here, but one of the skills that I'm thinking about in particular, I'm teaching high school right now, so I'm working with teachers who are specifically teaching math skills. And I have to explain that I work in a school where we're doing everything as an inquiry-based approach. So it's a very interesting independent school, and I love what I do there. But we do everything by an inquiry-based approach. And what we're finding is students are coming in to this inquiry-based learning where they're learning about how math works and why, we do square roots and how this math strategy for multiplication works, and they're not getting it. And we had a project recently where students were asked to run a store and they couldn't understand how to make change.
Oh.
Yeah. So we're teaching them, okay, so when you have a $20 bill and you've charged them, say, I'm going to say $18.98, and they give you $1.02. I might be explaining this wrong. I'm very sleepy. It's way past my dead time.
Mm-hmm.
But basically there was a skill that was lacking. They couldn't understand, why are you giving me this extra money?
Yeah, well, and this is the question though about, is there a way where if you're explaining the processes of how the basic functions work, wouldn't it? Why is it then that the difficulty is that people will not be able to apply those processes in a common everyday life process? And this is also tying into the larger problem of why it is that in our culture there seems to be a difficulty of being able to comprehend different orders of magnitude, or being able to understand why anything beyond the pre-calculus level is needed, or why we even teach pre-calculus. Do you find that this inquiry-based approach might be part of the reason for why we're having such difficulty in math phobia in our culture?
I'd have to think about that, because I almost think it's the opposite. It's the rote memorization approach where, you have to learn all of your times tables by the time you're in grade 3. That starts the math phobia. And then when you get into the inquiry-based approach, you're like, oh, well, now I understand why this is a thing. And it makes them a bit more positive, a bit more encouraged that math isn't just this scary thing of rote memorization and 5 times 5 is 25. It becomes, oh, well, this has a practical application.
Well, when you said that you had that project, well, going back to the project that you were talking about with regards to the store, when people were not able to learn how to run the store, was that going into the project, or did they still have that problem coming out of it?
I'm not sure about that particular project. It was run by some different teachers, so I'm not sure what the end result of that was.
Okay, well, okay. Well, I was just going to say, just out of the curiosity, do you see the students generally coming out of this inquiry-based approach, learning the math a little bit more effectively, all things considered, or is it still, are they still having the same problems going in that they were coming out in general?
I would say that the attitudes towards math are more positive, and we're getting a lot more students who are engaged with mathematics, and we're looking at careers that involve more mathematics. And of course, when you become engaged in that process, you start wanting to learn the scary stuff. So I would say that we are getting students who are better equipped and more willing to do those scary things and kind of get over that fear and do really well in math.
All right. So essentially, then it does look like the inquiry-based approach that in some ways that Common Core is trying to teach, or variants of it, does in fact actually at least encourage students to push on towards the higher mathematics, which in turn might open more STEM fields across the board. That's
what I feel, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think I kind of ran out of anything else that wanted to know about for that. But thanks again, Tristan, for coming on board, and it was great talking to you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yep. So with Tristan Harris being on board, that gives you a snippet from a teacher's perspective. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip to a quick Common Core problem that's been making the rounds on Facebook, just to give a practical example. And actually, Tristan, if you'd if you're still here, you could tell me, just taking a look at this Common Core problem, which compared to the old version of this, which version makes more sense to you?
Okay.
So what we're looking at here is 53 plus 37 equals 90.
Yes.
The version on the left here is 3 plus 7 equals 0, carry 1 to the top, and then 1 plus 5 plus 3 equals 9. That's the older version. The Common Core version seems to be 53 and then break the 37 down into 3 groups of 10 and 7, which adds to 83 plus 7 goes to 90. Which version do you think better teaches the concept of how numbers work, and in turn teaches this inquiry or which version do you think would be more effective for teaching students the basic computational capabilities, and in turn would prep them for learning better stuff like algebra?
I'm looking at the questions, and I'm going back into my own education, because I remember in grade 1 looking at a problem very similar to this one. It was my first attempt with addition, and I didn't understand what this whole number in the first column was. Like, why are we putting a 1 on top of the 5? Does that make it a 15? Does that make it a 5 and a 1 with a unicorn horn? I don't know. And And then I'm looking at this next problem as a teacher. That one makes me very happy. And that's because now I'm seeing, okay, so we show this problem to students, and then we look at, I would demonstrate that second problem with the right next to the, or the 53 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 7. But I don't think I would show it quite that way. What I would do is I would say, okay, how do we make 53? Let's show me with a 10 frame. I wish I could draw on this. So a 10 frame is used in primary and sometimes intermediate education to represent what a full 10 looks like. It's just like a 2x5 grid, and essentially it shows you how many of these make 50, and then we have another 10 frame that's empty, and then you add the 3 in. So that represents, okay, so this is how we've made 53. So now we're going to do the 37. How do we make 37? So we add the 10 frame, and then another 10 frame, and then another 10 frame, and then we add the 10 frame that just has 7 dots in it, and then they see all together, oh, this is how we're going to add this up. This is a huge thing for students to look at. So then what we do is we go, okay, so let's go back. We put the 10 frames together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We stop. Although I might be reading this wrong. Yes. And then we add the 7, the one left over. We have 87. But I'm seeing there's a 3 in here. So there's another 10 frame with an empty 3. My apologies. Then we add the 3 and the 7 together. Oh, that makes another 10. That makes 90. So I'm seeing that mathematical process illustrated in this problem, not quite how I would show it, but it's showing that that step-by-step thing that some of my students really need.
So also, just out of curiosity, one of the biggest objections that I've been seeing to Common Core is the fact that parents apparently cannot help their own students with their math homework. They cannot help their children with their math homework.
Mm-hmm.
What is have you heard this complaint from parents before? And if so, or heard it from around the teacher faculty lounge? And if so, what is the most common response to that? How do we bring parents in on being able to teach children math using similar processes to these?
One of the approaches that teachers in my districts and other schools across my province use is we actually introduce parents to math lessons. So they actually come in for an afternoon and their kids kind of give them a tour of their classroom. And we have these math materials available for parents to see. So that way they actually get to see how we're doing math with their children. And we always invite them in afterwards. If you are having difficulties with particular math concepts, come on in. We'll show you how we do it here and the reasons that we do it. And one of the things I believe in thoroughly is telling parents why we're teaching them this way, and even showing them, does this make more sense to you if we do it like this, or if we do it like this? Yes, one way might be faster, but for your child in particular, or for children who are at this stage of development, this is going to show them how this works. And I've had a very positive response. I've only taught one class like that, but it was a very positive response, and just, oh, wow, so I see why this is happening now. Just being an open teacher really is a good philosophy.
All right. Well, good to know that at least we're dealing with good to know that we're at least dealing with more open teachers, etc., and that will in turn potentially generate not only better goodwill with the kids learning, but with the parents being able to be incorporated into the education process.
Absolutely. And we really are moving towards a more open approach to education just in general. We're using portfolios. We're inviting parents into classrooms. Just as a side note, this is kind of how we're going towards education. I think Common Core, if it's using it this way, would be much more suited to a program or a school where you have that open communication with the parents.
Mm-hmm. Now, there was one other question I did want to touch on. Are you teaching in BC by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, now I came across an article a little while back which was going to be talking about providing more open education and allowing students to pick more of what they wanted to learn. Woohoo! And with regard to that, I was hearing that math some of the higher algebra stuff and the higher pre-calculus foundations would only be available for those students who wanted to go on to university. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on students being able to pick what math they wanted to learn versus what math they didn't, given that math is more of a consistent field. As a teacher, what are your thoughts on this? Is this a good thing, or
So I'm not entirely familiar with the new curriculum in terms of mathematics. However, we are introducing a new curriculum in British Columbia. High school will go into effect in 2017. New curriculum for elementary and middle school is going into effect in 2016. And in fact, I'm in one of the schools that is piloting this new curriculum. So my understanding is that we're using a similar approach to mathematics that we have done in previous editions. Like when I went to school, we had principles, we had, I can't remember what the name of the other course was, and then we had foundations of mathematics. That streaming will still probably be in effect. However, it is more geared towards what you want to do after you graduate from high school. And it's a lot to ask a child, what do you want to do after you leave high school? But there are some children who know that they would like to attend university, or they would like to go into a trades program, or, they want to go on and do music. And with a personalized approach that we are moving towards for high school, from what I understand, we're looking more at how do we make math focused around what students want to do? And we're not going to be forcing students to do a level of math that they're not comfortable with, unless, of course, they are willing to move to that direction. So I think what's going on with the curriculum there is we're really going to try and encourage students to do a math that is more focused on what they want to learn. And what you were saying about the open schools is actually really interesting, because I just completed a course in online education, because that is something that interests me. And the policies in BC mean that students who are in any high school, public, independent, private, homeschooled, have the option of registering at any number of schools and any number of programs. So I can have a student who is attending a public secondary school in, say, Coquitlam, and they are welcome to take online courses in Saanich, but they are also welcome to take courses at independent schools, brick and mortar independent schools. And we're really building on that personalized curriculum, that personalized approach. So if they find out that they offer a mathematics program at one school that is more suited to how they learn, they're welcome to go and register for that school and take that course.
So just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts on this as a teacher? Like, do you think that this personalized education is actually benefiting students in the long run, or?
I work in a school that has literally saved kids' lives because it is a personalized approach. We have students who have come from very difficult situations, who are not in safe spaces at their own schools, at their brick and mortar public schools, or are not able to access education in a way that would be good for their mental or physical health. And by personalizing their curriculum, we are able to offer students things that they couldn't do at their traditional public schools. And we're able to say, you know what, if you want to go on and be a musician, work in aviation, become a recording artist or dancer, we're here for you, and we're here to build a program that is based on your interests and your abilities. And I believe that that is one of the best things I can offer my students. I would go to school every day, and I feel like I'm making a difference in my students' lives. And as a teacher, that is incredibly rewarding.
One final question from the perspective of a teacher, and then we can probably call it quits there. With regards to both functional literacy and functional numeracy in our society, I did see that there were some statistics a while back about how the rates of both numeracy, of functional numeracy and functional literacy, have been going down in the province. For example, a couple of years ago, there had been a quote about how barely 40% of students who are graduating grade 12 could construct a complex sentence properly. Do you think this particular personal tailored education will be able to address some of these more functional issues for allowing people to function better in society as apt critical thinking citizens when the time comes that they achieve the age of majority?
I had to wonder about the statistics, because I'm wondering if they're coming from our provincial evaluations or if they're coming from independent studies. But in general, I would say that having a personalized approach where my student who wants to write a novel is allowed to take a special novel writing centered class and build those skills in his own way. I believe that he would be offered the same structure and the same learning opportunities as a student who never wanted to take English in the first place, but has to do it for grade 12 to graduate, because we have amazing dedicated teachers in this province, I hope. And when we have a personalized curriculum, we can now take a student who never wanted to take English and find something that really interests them, so we can get them to that level of functional literacy and functional numeracy.
All right. Well, brilliant. Thanks again, Tristan, for coming on the program. And
my pleasure.
yeah, I think we'll end it there. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. This has been Math and You, the functional applications of math in our society. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And once again, if you need any math question answered, feel free to post it in the comments below. As always, have a happy hunting.